this was an argument.
This is
disgusting. I mean, you saw there he was not only kicked, punched repeatedly, he was robbed. He ended up in hospital with a brain bleed, covered in milkshakes, which we don't know what they were in there. There was all sorts of differing accounts on that, so never mind that. But that is such a disgusting attack, and all he did was just be amongst the crowd, taping what was happening.
What he did, Rita, was exercise his First Amendment rights as a journalist, which he is, to go and document and continue to document this mob, which have taken control of the streets of downtown Portland, Oregon, with barely any intervention from the mayor, with no intervention from the police, who would appear to be stood down. You see the injuries there on the screen that he sustained, bruises, cuts, bleeding, and there were internal injuries as well. And this is all from this mob that calls himself supposedly anti-fascist, who goes around with black masks on their face, with all sorts of assault gloves and helmets and things like that, like any sort of fascist paramilitary organization, which is essentially what they are, claiming that what they're doing is punching Nazis. Come on.
But I tell you, yeah, but punching Nazis, this guy is, you know, a migrant, an Asian American who is gay. You know, he is, they are behaving like fascists by their own definition.
Yeah.
And they've been rioting again overnight. They've had another incident. But
We've got Andy back.
We've got Andy back. All right.
Hey, Andy, how are you? We're glad to see you looking a lot better than you were in those pictures, Andy. How are you?
It's a pleasure to be with you. Thanks for having me on.
Okay, Andy. So tell us about what happened last week and how you've been since then.
On the 29th of June, I was covering a demonstration in Portland as a journalist. I came there with my new GoPro, which I was excited to use. But I was also concerned because Antifa had been ramping up their threats and intimidation and harassment against me. I was on your show not that long ago to talk about what happened on the 1st of May. So I did have that on the back of my mind, but I had no idea that by the end of the day on last Saturday that I would end up in the emergency room in the hospital, diagnosed with a brain hemorrhage from the mob attack that happened, ironically, right in front of the Central Police Precinct in downtown.
where were the police? Why did they not intervene during that attack? And what have they done since then?
Well, since then, I have not heard from them really much at all. As far as I know, there's been no arrests. I mean, one issue, as you can see in the video, is that most of the people attacking me are masked, and that's a strategy they use called black bloc. The police, as for where they were that day, I don't know. If they were nearby, I didn't see them. I had earlier in the day reported to them 2 separate instances of getting milkshakes thrown in my face and on my head, and they chose to do nothing. Even while the suspect was within their eyesight, they said that if they approached the person or spoke to him or her, that it could be an incitement.
Oh.
So how scared were you, Andy, during those scenes that we've seen? And what physically did you fear was happening to you?
Well, what was there's so much sick irony in all of this, because the protesters were chanting "No hate, no fear." That's what I remember hearing. And then all of a sudden something bashes me really hard on the back of the head. And I've never been in a fight, didn't even know what a punch was supposed to feel like. So before I could sort of even comprehend what had just happened, then all the punches kept coming in every direction. And the video that's gone viral, unfortunately, only shows the second half of the attack, so there was quite a bit more. When I thought it was over, that's when the mob started pelting me with this hailstorm of liquid and eggs and milkshakes and other hard objects at my face. So I could not even see which way to remove myself from the situation, and that's the insidiousness of the so-called milkshaking, which unfortunately a lot of journalists and media commentators think to be a non-violent, cute way of political dissent. It's not.
Well, let's talk about some of the media reaction, because despite that assault, the second half of it being caught on video and just being such a despicable, violent assault, there were so many people within the media who were seeking to minimise what happened to you, to say you somehow provoked it by being there, and questioned whether you should have put yourself in that situation. What do you say to them?
Well, these people who are raising questions on how I put myself at risk are usually the first to come out and say don't victim blame, and they were also the first to come out and say that we should believe Justice Smollett. So these people are just hypocrites. They say they care about marginalized communities. I guess I was the wrong type of victim to them.
Well, it's been extraordinary because there's been write-ups in the New York Times that have just been so deeply dishonest about what happened, and, you know, everyone from Tom Arnold to Louise Mensch to media people who have sought to character assassinate you and say this was all exaggerated, this was all... There's even a conspiracy theory that you know, they were all far-right attackers, that they attacked you. I mean, can you believe some of the craziness that has ensued since last week's attack?
There are a lot of weird conspiracy theories out there, and those public statements are defamatory. So I'm putting my attorney on notice for any claims that I somehow paid people to attack me or that I collaborated with people to attack me. As for, I mean, one point I would like to make is there's a lot of attention on the violent group of the Antifa militants, but I think at some point we need to be having discussion about the larger concentric circle of the nonviolent Antifa sympathizers, which came out in full force the past week to mainstream, whitewash, and sanitize this violent militant movement.
Do you find it disturbing that, as a journalist, you've had so many other journalists, particularly I think the New York Times and a lot of other places, who have, and the Guardian and elsewhere, who have all tried to minimize this and basically say that you're not a journalist, not show any solidarity with you, who's been attacked viciously while covering a real legitimate story that they've all thought really should be kept from people's wider attention?
Well, that is disturbing. I mean, if their contention is that if somebody's an opinion journalist or a columnist doesn't make them a journalist, then, well, that sets the arrow directly back at them.
Andy, I want to ask you, the aim, the goal of these thugs is to intimidate and silence you and stop you doing the work you've been doing. Has this had this effect on you? How are you going to feel strapping on your GoPro another time? You're now world-renowned. What's this going to do to you next time? Are you going to go to another Antifa rally?
You know, my immediate reaction is I want to say, of course, nothing's... they will not have scared me. They will not have intimidated me into silence. But at the same time, I'm still recovering from a brain injury, and I'm having to go through therapy in the near future because of some of the cognitive issues that I'm dealing with. And so what perhaps makes me most frustrated in all of this is, at least in the meantime, they've perhaps accomplished their goal. I've received further threats from either Antifa or their sympathizers letting me know that this is a warning that I better walk away while I still can. So hopefully, I mean, the problem in all of this is really I've been having to document all of this primarily on my own. If there were more journalists coming in to highlight the violent extremism of this group, they would not be able to pick out the few journalists they dislike to attack.
Well, that's why they go after you, because you're doing real journalism, documenting what they do. Now, you mentioned you've got a lawyer now and you're going to be going after people defaming you. But I'm wondering, are you going to be looking at taking action against the city and the police force? Because they have known about the threats posed to you. They knew about this mob being violent, and yet they've let them run riot for months in Portland.
I'm looking to hold anyone and everyone accountable, responsible in this beating. And wherever that may lead all the way up to, I'm not sure. We'll see where the evidence leads. But as you have pointed out, Portland has had some issues with citizens getting targeted on the streets over and over and over, and the city's governance not enacting any changes.
Andy Ngo, you're incredibly brave. You have many fans and supporters here through Outsiders in Australia and on Twitter. Keep, fantastic work. Our thoughts are with you. These thugs have to be brought to account. We will keep in touch with you, and please look after yourself and get well soon. Andy Ngo, thanks so much for being on Outsiders.
Thank you. I would like to say we've started a legal crowdfunding, so if you can support in that way, please do.
Give us the details on that, Andy.
Go to my Twitter. It's my top tweet.
Fantastic. Okay, Andy Ngo, thanks so much, and please do that. What a brave man. Incredible.
Mr. Andy Ngo on Twitter if you want to
Mr.
find
Andy Ngo on Twitter, and Ngo is Ngo.